Y'all, we got a super special guest for you today. Now, this episode is going to be a lot different than any of our other episodes because we're not actually talking to a woman who has been in an abusive relationship and survived. We are talking to a coach who is out here in these streets trying to give y'all some good quality information so that you can survive this life and all the buffoonery that is out there. You hear me? This man right here I am super excited to have him as a guest on the show. He is out here doing God's work in these streets, and he got some nuggets for your fries today. Y'all give it up for Mr. Kevin. Kevin, welcome to the building.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. I am so excited about this. And I think that I know that you have a lot of valuable information that is going to help a lot of people. So we're going to hop on in, dive deep in, go for it. So how long, first of all, have you ever experienced or been around in your family or growing up any kind of abuse in any way that you're familiar with?
I have not experienced anything from family. The only thing I've experienced was just toxic relationships, was intimate relationships, and the relationships weren't necessarily abusive, but they were just toxic. And I had an experience of being in a narcissistic relationship as well too. So yeah, it was just relationships.
Okay, so let's sit right there for a minute because the word toxic and narcissistic is thrown around a lot. And I want to help the listeners so that they better understand what can qualify as a toxic relationship, and then also what qualifies as narcissistic traits or a narcissistic type person.
Okay, it's simply put, I mean, it's any relationship where you always feel like you have to give up your inner peace and happiness to satisfy that person. Now, the when it comes to toxic, it's kind of broad because toxic, I mean, it falls under different categories. You got toxic, you got people that are codependent or emotionally needy. That's a toxic trait because you have a partner or you have anybody that's relying on somebody else to fulfill their void. And the problem is that if you're in a relationship with someone, especially in a relationship with someone, that if you find yourself giving and giving to that person, they demand all your time and attention, and that's not normal for any healthy relationship. So the person doing the giving, they end up feeling mentally and emotionally burned out because a lot is being asked of them to fulfill a void of an emotionally needy or codependent person. So that's a toxic trait. Another toxic trait, of course, is somebody that's always really critical towards the other person. And this can fall in the category of verbal emotional abuse, name calling, disrespectfulness, anything. When it comes to abuse, which falls in the category, of course, toxic, that's, intentionally harming somebody as a need to control that person and have power over that person. And then you have people, another toxic trait would be that somebody that's just critical of themselves all the time. You got the type that hates life, that hates themselves, always complaining. And of course, you can't find inner peace and happiness being with somebody like that. So anytime you're giving up your peace and happiness and for somebody and you feel like the relationship is not going anywhere, you feel like you're not growing and it's always arguments and always more negativity, then that qualifies as a toxic relationship.
That's
Okay.
good. That's good. So before you even get to the narcissistic part, I need to touch on what you just broke down. So the last one that you said, which I didn't even think about because this wasn't my situation, but the last one you said is when someone is constantly feeling down, basically walking around like Eeyore, woe is me, all the world is so terrible, sad, blah, blah, blah. And it's really like to draw attention that's a specific need to get attention, even if it's negative attention from other people. So I just want to understand that you can be in a relationship that's toxic because, like you said, the person who is constantly giving gets burned out with the giving, gets burned out with trying to lift up the other person's spirits, and you're not at peace. It's just an unhealthy environment for both parties involved. But be mindful of anyone who is constantly just negative. Like, there's nothing positive about their life. There's no reason you need to be in it. You can love them and pray for them for a distance, but you are not going to save everybody. Goodness.
Woo! Absolutely.
The
Absolutely.
first two things you said, I was just like, dang, that's it. You were talking about being codependent, emotionally needy and codependent. And that was something that I missed in the beginning of my relationship. Because homeboy was, before we met, I found out, he had been moving, like he had been in a lot of different houses and they weren't ever in his name. He was always staying with other women, whether they were intimate or not. He was always staying with other women. When we met, he was with his sister. And I'm now seeing outside of that, it's like he went from his sister straight into with, like, it was me and him. And so
Mm-hmm.
not being able really, or choosing not to live on their own or do things on their own, but constantly needing you there, constantly wanting to know where you are and when you're coming back. That's what I was getting. And it's just like it
Mm-hmm.
takes away your freedom. Toxic relationships take away your freedom. And in that kind of situation, you just can't do anything right. Like you can't, it's like you're not allowed to live unless you're living and they're attached to you. So I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to touch on that because when you said that, it just really pulled up. Like I saw that immediately, but I didn't even think of it as a sign or a flag. I always had this like I gotta go save somebody type mentality, unintentional.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wasn't out looking to say let me get somebody who needs help, but it just always is like I ain't trying to call nobody a dog, but it was just like I have this love for animals, and so I would see
Mm-hmm.
people and I'm like, oh, but I could just love you back to, to your best version of yourself. No, you cannot.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
You
I
can't
agree.
love someone to the best version of themselves. They
Yep.
have to
I agree.
love themselves to the best version of themselves, and then y'all meet up and do whatever y'all do from there.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to touch on those
Absolutely.
two before you moved on to describing what narcissism is or what the narcissistic traits in a person to look out for if you're already in a relationship or if you're just entertaining someone in hopes of
Mm-hmm.
potentially starting a relationship with them.
Okay. Cool. Cool. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So narcissistic traits. Okay. So basically, I mean, basically, a narcissist. I mean, yeah, it is a word. It's a word that's being thrown around a lot, and I spend a lot of time in private groups on social media, and I've noticed that it's a word very much thrown around inside the groups. And I would say, from my observation, more than half of the people inside the group just get it all wrong. And no offense to them, but it's a word that's very much thrown around, and most people ignore the basics of a narcissist. So what separates a narcissistic person from a regular toxic person is that a narcissist they have an inflated ego. And when you go into a relationship with these types of people, everything is all about them. So what happens is that not all narcissists are abusive, by the way. Most people think that narcissists, they automatically assume that a person that's abusive, well, they're a narcissist, but no, that's not necessarily the case. A narcissistic person is just an inflated ego person, an ego-driven person. So they feel like everything has to be all about them. And when they go into a relationship, they expect you to cater only to their needs only. And they don't care about, it's not about we or us. They don't care about your identity, your values, like any other healthy relationship. A narcissist, they all care about themselves. Now, the thing about narcissists is that anytime a narcissist doesn't get their way, and this becomes a problem, is that they get angry. Because their whole inflated ego is dependent on you meeting their needs, wants, and demands. Anytime a narcissist doesn't get their way, they get angry. And if they're abusive, then they start tearing down your self-esteem, make you feel worthless until you have no choice but to cater to their needs. So that's why most survivors, they come out of the relationship, feeling lost and not know who they are anymore, and carrying a negative identity, through an abusive narcissist. So yeah, so overall, a narcissist is all about an ego-driven person. Everything is all about them. That's what separates them from the average toxic person.
Man, just read me. Just read me, Kev. Just read me. So, what would you say then for someone who's dating? Like you're getting to know somebody, not necessarily someone who's coming out of an abusive relationship, but just in general. What are some subtle traits that you need to look out for when you're going on dates with this person and you're having conversations with them, you're getting to know them, that might not be a red flag, but needs to be on alert as to say this person might be narcissistic?
Okay, that's a good question. Um, I mean, somebody that was a little tough one if when it comes to a narcissist. So a red flag that might not necessarily be a red flag, but something that somebody might give somebody alert that they, of a potential narcissist. Um, I would say that just keep a lookout for, like if somebody, kind of like dominates the whole conversation. They won't give you, they seem like they make it all about them in that conversation. That might not necessarily be narcissistic, but it is something to be alert for. They're not taking no interest in the things that you like and what you want out of life. Because a real conversation, if you want to get to know somebody on a date, it's all about two people. One person talks and gets to know the other person, and then vice versa. The person that you're dating should be taking an interest in things that makes you happy. They want to know what you do in your spare time. What do you want out of life? What do you see? What do you enjoy doing as hobbies and whatnot? But a person that dominates the conversation and makes it all about them, you somehow kind of get a feeling that everything tends to be focused on that person. So I wouldn't. So I would say that it's something to be aware of. You might not necessarily detect narcissism, right then and there on the spot, because as time goes on, they're going to start revealing more and more about their true colors. So I would say somebody that you would say that maybe somebody that dominates maybe dominates the conversation. It seemed like they make it about them, and I would say that's something to look out for.
Okay. And now I've heard, because I'm in some of the same private groups as you, and I've heard that through conversations that I've been having with other people who have done a little more research on the narcissistic side, I've been hearing the words covert and overt narcissism. So can you explain to us what the difference is between someone who's covert versus someone who's overt?
Okay, that I don't know too much the difference. I just know the basics of narcissists because I have heard that those words being thrown around a lot too, covert and over. As a matter of fact, I would say the people in private groups they would they would have more knowledge and education than I do when it comes to the difference. And there's even terms that they mention that I never heard of that they mention, but I'm always learning. I'm always learning something new. So I just to be honest with you, I just know just basic narcissists, the fundamentals. Now, as far as the covert and overt, you might have some maybe narcissistic traits that might seem a little bit more aggressive than other ones. I can't say whether it's covert or overt, but some narcissists might be a little bit more aggressive, and other ones might be a little bit more reserved, but they still have these narcissistic traits. So that might be the difference between the two, to my speculation.
Okay.
So, mhm.
It was a little different in my case. Like when we first met, it was really, he seemed really interested in my hobbies, really interested in conversation, really interested in getting to know me. But it's almost like he was doing recon or something. I don't know if I'm using that right, but it's like he was going out there like studying film to see how the relationship could then later be manipulated at a later point. And the crazy thing is, and what I want to share with the listeners is that you you don't necessarily see it in the beginning, but like Kevin just said, it starts to show up. So you have to pay attention to the things, listen to your body and the things that make you uncomfortable, the things that feel unpleasant, the things that disrupts your spirit a little bit. Like take note of that. I was just talking to somebody the other day and I was like, I'm not really looking towards highlighting the or looking at the highlight reel of anyone anymore. Like all of the things that are good, I see the good, but now I'm focusing more on like the small pebble, like a pebble in your
Mhm.
shoe. I'm focusing more on the small things now that I'm like, okay, I don't think I would be 100% okay with this. Is that going to cause an issue in the future? We need to have a conversation about it now. And so when you're just listen to your body, because your body tells you when something just doesn't sit right or feel right with you, and we always try to push it off, and that's how I'll speak for myself. That's how I ended up in an abusive relationship, is because my body was like, no, sis, you don't want this. And I was like, no, it's okay. We'll just, it's not that big a deal, or it's just a little lie. Nah, it adds up and it comes out later. And so with relationships, you already have enough things to work on and work through together. You don't want to add something that never should have been there in the first place, because you didn't listen to your body and you didn't take heed to the little flags, the little signs that were there all along. It's always a crumb trail to the witch's house. Like, you got it. So what
Yep.
I just want to veer a little bit though and ask you, how long have you been doing coaching for people who have been in narcissistic abusive relationships and things like that? And what got you started in this field?
Okay. I started out. It all started since the 2020 pandemic, and by that time, like about a couple years prior to that, I had got my certification. So I got my certification in life coaching, and then about a couple years later, once the 2020 pandemic occurred, that's how I got started. But leading up to that point, prior to that, what I was doing was I was speaking to adult college students. It's the same kind of college that I graduated from. And the college it's a small college that's made for, not like a university, but it's like a small college. You may have heard some of these names like ECPI, Tidewater Tech, Centaur College. um, Colleges like that that's made for adults that want to go back and get their college degree. So that's the college. I graduated from one of those types of colleges. So then I came back and became a speaker. Now, I was ordinarily a speaker on personal development, and I was speaking about how to find happiness, how to build confidence to all the college students. And I was talking about how to signs look out for in a toxic person. So I was doing the whole 9 yards, anything that can interrupt your journey for finding happiness and reaching your goals. And then eventually after that, I started posting on social media, started posting on Facebook. Same thing, personal development. I was doing it at random to anybody that would listen. And I wasn't really talking about abuse and narcissists at that time. It was just basically personal development, just any random content. And plus, I was posting quotes. And so what happened was, when 2020 pandemic had occurred, of course they shut all the schools down, and I didn't have really was really lost. I didn't have nowhere else to go. I didn't know who I could speak to, because I was kind of lost at that point. And I didn't, I enjoyed speaking to the college students, but then since they shut the schools down, then I didn't know where to go. The only thing I was doing was posting on my Facebook. I was still doing that, still doing regular content. So what happened was, I thought about something. I've noticed that majority of the people that responded to all my content on Facebook pertaining to personal development were women. And these were just random women that these were women on my page that just liked my content. I was speaking about happiness and how to build confidence, and so that brought to my attention. So then I thought about what's one of the most common problems that women in general face, and then I thought about being victims and survivors of domestic abuse. So then what I did was I said, well, if I can combine my resources to what I know in personal development, maybe I can help women that's actually gone through abusive relationships and toxic relationships, since it affects more women more so than men. I mean, of course, men get affected, but women they're more a little bit of a higher percentages when it comes to victims. So then after that, I decided to go ahead and change my whole social media content around to target for victims and survivors of domestic abuse, and combine, what I know in personal development. This time I was talking about more like awareness, the red flags look out for. And at that same time, I started spending time in private groups and offering advice, and at the same time observing and reading the stories that the other victims and survivors had gone through, and that helps me generate more content. So I'm learning at the same time. So then that's when I changed my whole Facebook, and then decided to go ahead and talk about domestic abuse and narcissistic abuse as well too.
Okay, and that makes sense. Yeah, the pandemic, even though it was tough, I think it was a blessing for a lot of people, because it forced people to sit with themselves and either learn how to grow from the state that they were in, or just stay in the state. But it revealed a lot in the character and the nature of the people who are able to just escape, typically by leaving to go to work all the time or leaving for whatever reason. So that's really amazing. And thank you for taking the time to respond to the people who were more interested, you know, in the information that you were sharing, so that you can now target exactly what it is that you want to say and the help that you want to give to people who are seeking it. Because, you know, I was on your page a little bit, just scrolling through some of your content and your information, and it's really good to help people. One thing that I know is, like, women who finally do get out of the abuse. You mentioned it earlier when you were talking about the narcissism and the toxicity and the abuse part. Even if it wasn't physical, the mental, emotional abuse of constantly trying to wear the person or the woman, in most situations, wear them down mentally and take away whatever confidence that they did have in themselves. It's a constant nitpicking to try to strip that of them, so that they feel more insecure and they feel more dependent, and they feel like, if I do leave, like, what's the point? It's worthless. So what's some advice that you have to someone who has already gotten out of that situation, and now they're on the other side? They feel kind of lost, or they feel like they miss the person who's been abusing them. They knew that it didn't feel good. They knew they didn't like it, but for some reason they don't understand, why do I still miss this person, and how can I get over it?
Okay. All right. Well, I would say work on finding yourself again. Work on your identity. When you find your identity, I mean, um that takes a lot of pressure off right there, because when you understand who you are and know your identity, because after all, you know, you lose yourself when you're in a narcissistic or an abusive relationship. You know, dealing with constant criticism all the time. So abusers, they like to try to attack your self-worth and make you feel worthless, and not to mention all the name calling and all the bad labels. So I would say to try to really work on finding yourself again. And there's all kinds of ways of doing that. Um, as a matter of fact, I'm about to start running an ad on a guide that I'm going to be offering to my viewers about how to do that. It's just a short guide on how to find yourself. So it's all about really finding your identity, and there's several ways you can do that. You can think about things that you like doing. You can think about compliments that you received in the past, or something like, you have also online personality assessment tests. Also, a lot of them are for free, and they're fairly accurate, because I took a lot of those tests myself, and they're pretty accurate. So I would say try to work on finding your identity, and also see value in who you are, and that's critical, because that pertains to your self worth. Now, as far as having these urges to go back and, well, missing this person, and that's very common too. Uh, trauma bonded, being trauma bonded, where you're tempted to go back to the same person that abused you. My best advice would be just to acknowledge that the relationship was abusive, and this person is not going to change. I mean, that's a argument by itself, right? Most people are going to say that abusers can't change, but I don't necessarily agree with that. At the same time, though, it's not like they can't change. It's just that they won't change. But do not bet on that possibility. Don't bet on that small possibility. If once a relationship is abusive, it should be game over. So then, if you want to prevent yourself from going back to the person that's abusive, then just acknowledge that person is abusive, and just understand that the reason, what you're really hooked on is you're just only hooked on what was good about that person. And when you focus on what's good about somebody, then you tend to kind of push aside all their wrongdoings, and then it's like you fall in love and all over again. And to watch out for too, because abusers don't give up easily, so they're going to try to persuade you back. They're gonna try to do everything they can to try to persuade you back. So this goes back to knowing your worth. Okay, once you understand your worth, okay, well, I'm better than this. I don't need to go back to somebody that's toxic, and I know my worth. And once you understand that, and you start really working on yourself and start pursuing your goals, I promise you, after a while, you're not gonna have the urge to want to go back, because you're gonna be so busy enjoying your life and happiness. It's like, why would you want to go back? And that's taking a step backwards. So know your worth, and understand at the same time that the relationship was abusive, and that person, they are who they are, and you be all right.
Kevin, this is so good. This is so good. Oh my God. So I want to unpack this really quick. You just said that when someone is abusive, I'm glad you said that this is an argument in and of itself, because I have seen people say, like, defending, maybe not intentionally and directly defending people who are abusive, but saying to other people, basically, don't say that they can't change, because they can change. And then they'll probably give an experience that they had where they did change, and maybe they did. But I love that you mentioned there is a small possibility that that person can change. So there's not, we can't say that people can't change, because they can. And I think that it takes a whole lot of God and a whole lot of humility and a whole lot of recognition and responsibility and accountability on their part to actually see that they need to change and then take steps to want to change. But with that being said, Kevin just told you, don't bet on that small chance. Don't bet on it, because you're going to be holding on to the hope that you know this person can be better, because you've seen the side of them that they wanted you to see, which was their better side. That's how they got you in most of the time in the first place. And so if you're holding on to that hope of that side outwinning the abusive side, it's most likely not going to happen. Because like Kev said, you know, most abusers are narcissistic, so they got their ego and their pride in the way to overshadow the insecurities and the unhealed trauma that they're coming from. And when they do that, they don't have the sense of humility to sit themselves down and acknowledge that maybe they acknowledge, I ain't gonna lie, they'll acknowledge to your face that it was wrong what they did, but it doesn't mean that they're going to change, because their character and their nature has become so conditioned to behaving in this way and trying to control and manipulate everyone around them in this way, that they don't want to feel open to vulnerability to have to fix it. And that's what's going to happen in order for them to fix it. So you said something major right there. Yes, ladies, if you're listening and you're in an abusive relationship, it is possible that person can change. If you've left the abusive relationship, it is possible that that person can change. But the likelihood that they have changed is so small, it's not worth you going back. And the guilt that you feel, or the shame, or the low self-esteem that you feel when you see that they've moved on, that's what they do. That's what a parasite does. Once the host is gone, they have to go find another host. It's not that you weren't valuable, you weren't worthy, you weren't enough. It's just that you finally realized you were valuable, worthy, and enough to leave. Now they got to go find another source. So it's not a reflection on you, it's a reflection on their, like Kevin mentioned earlier, the emotional neediness, the codependency. It has nothing to do with you. And so you'll walk around with this guilt and this, why wasn't I good enough for him to change? He didn't change. The only thing he changed was the source. And so not dwelling on that is very important. And then the other thing that you mentioned, which was if you did get out of the relationship and you're looking back and you have this care for this person or this love for this person, and you're wondering why, really, really emphasize, like, put emphasis on why did you leave in the first place? Like, really, really listen to why you left in the first place. And then ask yourself, does the quote unquote the fake good that they showed you, because what I'm learning through my own experience and other people's experience and the conversations that we're having is they do this is this up and down mountain valley thing to keep you guessing. If I don't take you up high to show you the view and you're always in the valley, you're going to know you're in the valley. But at some point, I'm going to give you a little piece of grace and you feel like, oh, this can be different. It can be better. He can be better. He won't. He can't. It's all a manipulation tactic. It's all part of their plan to keep you in the loop. Because if you think there's a possibility of being good or good coming of it, they know your tendency to stay is going to be higher. So just focus on why you left. Focus on, and then what Kevin said also is, you said that the good that you felt was really just, it wasn't really them. It was just them giving you something that they knew you needed to make sure you stay. Like, to just, it's that one little piece. That's all it takes, is that one little piece of hope. It's not about them. You're not in love with the good version of them. You're in love with the fake version of them. That version of them doesn't actually exist in this world, in this reality. And so I'm glad that you mentioned those things. Ooh, it's good. I'm so glad you mentioned that because a lot of people struggle with that. People don't understand
Mhm.
why someone goes back to an abusive relationship if they've gotten out of it, or why they get into another abusive relationship when they've seen, the signs or the flags or the things like that. And it all goes back down to you knowing your self-worth. Kevin said it. You
Yep.
got to know your self-worth. You got to know how valuable you are. Because people know I knew I was valuable, but I didn't give myself enough credit of how valuable I was. And then I let myself make decisions out of my insecurities instead of from a confident place. So I like what you're pushing is what I push. If you can elevate your self-worth, if you can understand how valuable are, that you deserve respect, that you deserve to be considered, that you deserve to be treated like a human being and nice and loving and kind in all those things, and you deserve to be considered for stuff. You deserve the good out of people, not the bad. You have to start conditioning yourself to believe that over the lies that you told yourself or the lies that your parents, your abusive relationships or whatever have told you. You have to start feeding the truth. Whichever, I heard somebody say, like, whichever beast you feed is the one that's going to grow. So if you continue to feed the lies, that's the one you're going to grow and believe. But if you start starving the lies and feeding the truth, eventually, and it may take a while because it's a lot of things that you got to strip out. There's a lot of conditioning that you have to remove from yourself in order to overcome those insecurities and really see your self-worth and your value and start living confident in who you are and not allowing the decisions that you made to define you. That's how you get to a better place. That's how you stay out of an abusive relationship instead of going back. So thank you for sharing that. Man,
Yes.
that was good.
Yes.
Oh, that needed to be said. That needed to be
Hmm.
said. Wow.
Hmm.
That
Yeah,
needed to be said.
absolutely. Yeah,
What are,
yeah.
what are some of the common things that you notice, like with the women that you work with? What are some of the major things that you have to help them realize or help them see or become aware of that has kept them stuck in a state of either wanting to go back or a state of not valuing themselves?
It's more like not valuing themselves. Most of the people that I work with, one of their goals is usually they want to find themselves again. So they're stuck feeling lost, not knowing who they are. And I've had one client that her narcissistic relationship wasn't necessarily abusive, but I mean, she was already there. She just need a little bit of a boost of confidence to keep moving into the right direction. Since narcissists, they have a grip on you. They know how to put the charm on to try to win you back. But most of the people that I work with, though, a lot of them, they feel lost within themselves. They want to find themselves again, and sometimes I get some of them sometimes that have temptations of wanting to go back. So what I do as a coach, I mean, I break down the whole 9 yards about finding their identity and getting them to see value in themselves. So that way, they can pursue whatever their goals are. So a lot of them are just lost and not knowing where to go. And if you don't know who you are, you don't know your identity, then it's nearly impossible to find happiness. So most of the people, they just want to find themselves again.
So what kind of advice do you give to that person who is like they wanting to find themselves again, been there, done that, you feel you become so lost and you lose, like I felt like all of the
Mhm.
color in me was just fading away and I was turning into this black and white character, this gray character of a cartoon or something that just wasn't lively anymore. So what do you say to someone who wants to find themselves? Because you mentioned before, you said, one way to do this is to think about the things that you like. What do you say to the person who's like, I don't know what I like?
Take action. Act on something. There's got to be something that you like. Okay, you really have to really kind of sit down and really think about it. Because everybody has something that they enjoy doing, and you have to really kind of really sit down and really think about. It might not even require that much thought. But I mean, of course, it helps if to work with someone, to work with a counselor or a coach to help push you to the right direction too. But anytime that you're confused and you don't know what you like, just start with something. Just start with something small. I mean, if you enjoy writing, just start writing something. And if you enjoy walking around the park, think about that. Think about some of the things that you enjoy, something small that you could do. If it's walking around the park, if it's going to the beach, going fishing, you can. I find that if you get started on a hobby or on a particular hobby, because I find that they're not really asking themselves the right questions. So if you could think about a hobby that you enjoy doing, then just start doing it. Because sometimes finding your identity, it can be a complicated process. It can confuse a lot of people. They don't know where to start. I would say just start doing something. Just start doing something small, something that you enjoy doing. And everybody has that. There's always been something you were doing since childhood. So if you can get to doing that, then by all means do that. And then after a while, you'll start to discover yourself as time goes on. But it has to be intentional.
That's the word. It has to be intentional. And I think too, we often overthink things so much that we miss out on the importance of being intentional about looking into the small things. Like, what is it that I did do before I met this person? Or what was it that I thought about I might like to do before I met this person, or before I realized that I was in an abusive relationship or grew up around abuse? What was it that I wanted to do as a kid? I think we get so caught up in being adults that we lose sight of the childhood person that we either didn't get to experience or we did get to experience. And so being intentional, like Kevin said, it just being intentional about seeking, like not giving up, having grace with yourself. We all make mistakes. We don't get it all right. We never do. This is our first time on this planet as this person. So it's all trial and error if you look at it that way. Everything, every decision we make is all trial and error because we've never made it before in the season of our life that we're in the moment that we're making it. And I think that it's just so important to really just, for me, like, just go sit outside. Just go sit outside and be outside, and just take in fresh air and then sit with yourself. I think that is why people aren't intentional sometimes, because they're not comfortable with just sitting with themselves. Like, we're in a state in this world or this lifetime where constant distraction has to be, white noise has to be present in our lives. There has to be something dinging, there has to be something ringing, there has to be something that we can look at and not remember. But just sit down and be with yourself for a minute. Just go away from people and just find somewhere to sit and just be with your thoughts and then question your thoughts. Now, you mentioned you found that people aren't asking the right questions. What will be some of the examples if I come to you and I say, okay, I want to be intentional about figuring out who it is or what it is that I enjoy. I don't know what I enjoy. What are the right questions I need to start asking myself that'll lead me closer to elevating my self-worth, being more confident, and figuring out what it is that I want to do in life for me?
Well, how would you keep it simple? It's like, how would I do this? What's the most simplest way that I can get started? You can ask yourself that. I mean, well, the question I would ask somebody if I'm doing a one-on-one coaching session is that I would ask them that if you did know, what do you think that might be? Because a lot of times people say they don't know. I get that a lot. But if you did know, because that triggers the brain, that triggers the memory. That's when they start talking. Then, so asking the question from a different angle can get them to kind of open up a little bit. And if it's somebody, somebody can even ask themselves that question. I mean, if I did know, then what would it be? And then after a while, then your brain goes to work and you'll find all kinds of solutions, and figure out, how to, which direction to get started on.
That's
So yeah.
for sure. Like, I'm teaching my son, things are hard, problems. And so I'm trying to ingrain in him problem solving skills. And so when he comes to me with a problem, before I give him an answer, I ask him, what do you think the solution is? Or what could be the solution? Or what's another solution? To train him to think like that, because we don't get trained a lot of times to think. We're trained to follow instructions, stay inside the lines, and do all of this, but we aren't trained to critically think until we get to a math class. It's like, all right, critical thinking. Like, ain't nobody trained me to critically think. Y'all trained me to memorize and give back answers. And so with him, it's like, what's the solution? That's the same thing you just said. If I did know what the answer was, what would the answer be? And we just don't want to. We're so bombarded emotionally. We're so exhausted emotionally and spiritually and mentally and physically and all the things that sometimes we don't want to think. That's why people just turn on Netflix and Amazon and all these things, like I just want to not think after this long day. I just want to not think. I just want to watch stuff that's just numb to me. But when it comes to really, really improving who you are and really, really discovering who you are so that you can become the best version of you, so that if you do want to be with somebody, you can present yourself the best version. That way they either have to rise up or get left behind. It's going to take intentional critical thinking about who you are and what you want for yourself, and stop thinking about how your actions impact or affect, or would they be approved or validated by other people. Like that's another thing that was one of my challenges, like constantly trying to be approved and validated. Like validate yourself, approve yourself, and everybody else who's with you is going to be with you. If they not, just be able to let them go. Shoot.
Hmm.
Woo!
Hmm. Absolutely.
Good stuff. Coming through with the good stuff. Okay. So you've talked to the person who doesn't quite know where to start, but they do want to increase their self-worth and their confidence in all of these things. What about the woman who has been in an abusive relationship? Have you ever had anybody who's still in an abusive relationship come to you, or has it always been people who've gotten out that are start seeking the help?
That's a good question. Every now and then I get somebody to come to me and tell me that they're still actually in the relationship, and I have to admit those ones are a little bit more complicated to work with because, well, they're stuck between, you know, I want to leave the relationship, but then I still love and miss him. And so it's a little bit more complicated, you know, to work with people like that. But yeah, I get them every once in a while. Every once in a while, a small percentage of people that still uh, actually still stuck in the abusive relationship. Hmm.
Have you ever been able to help them navigate out? Because I mean, it's really, really hard, even for the people who want to help. It's really, really hard. And some, depending on the situation, can be really dangerous to get involved with someone else's decisions. But have you ever had the privilege of working with someone who was still in an abusive relationship, and through the process of working with you, they actually did, hey, I left, I'm out, now let's move and groove. Have you ever had the privilege?
Yeah, actually, I did work with a client. She was actually in the process of getting a divorce. So by the time she came to me, I mean, she was still legally married, but she was already in the process of getting a divorce, going through the process. And I basically just stood by her the whole time when she was on her way out the door. She was a little bit more easy to work with. And I will say, what made it even more easier is that she was just determined to get this thing done, get a divorce, and just move on. So I don't know too much about court cases and everything. I'm actually still learning, you know. So that's one of the reasons why I always prefer to work with people that's out of the relationship. But if I'm working with somebody that's currently in the marriage, um, and in her case, yeah, I did have the privilege because she was processing everything. She knew what she wanted. Her goal was to find herself again, and through the whole process, you know, she just, you know, made it on through. So now she's a successful woman and doing real good. No leftover feelings. You know, so yeah, we still talk sometimes a little bit in between. You know, I'm seeing her social media posts and she's doing just fine. And you know, so so yeah, yeah, she was determined to let it go. And you know, that was the one success that I had. But other than that though, I had people that were still in there. It was a little bit more different because they were crossed between I want to leave, well, but then again I still look. Then you got financial situations too. They got to go through the financial process. Then they got to find a job. I had some of them come to me and they didn't even have a job, and it's like wow, I really don't know how to. I mean, I try to give them the best advice that I can, but it's a little bit more difficult for me, you know, because they got so much stuff they have to work on before I can help them. And so yeah, I've had some cases like that, unfortunately. But I would tell them though, I would tell them just let me know in between how you're doing. You know, let me know how's everything, you know, coming along. So I would always still offer offer a hand. You know, any kind of advice I can give the best of my knowledge.
Right, right. I love what you said about the person who came out. You said, I can see her social media page and she's doing successful. what advice would you give to someone who's still in an abusive relationship that has a desire to get out, but they're more afraid of leaving than they are of staying because they don't know what it's going to be like on the other side. They don't know if they're going to be able to, like, they have nothing. They don't have, they may have kids, they may not have kids. They don't have their own car. They don't have their own, because of course he's controlling all of these things to manipulate you into staying. But what do you say to someone who's like, I want to leave, but I have nothing to go to. There's nothing out there for me. So why should I even bother?
Okay, that's a good question. You have people that are more worried about what's going to happen if I leave the relationship, and my advice is to focus on what's going to happen if you don't leave, if you continue to stay. I mean, what's it going to cost you? You know, you really have to think about these things. Is it going to cost you, how much, cost you your happiness? I mean, are you willing to let, more years, more of the best years of your life pass you right on by, over this relationship, something that could have been done earlier? Think about the impact that's going to have on your kids. Think about the impact that it's going to have on you as a parent. And, think about your future. So I would say just think more about what's going to happen if you don't leave, and then consider what's going to happen if you do, of course, because a lot of times things can get a little ugly, when the victim does leave the relationship, but still you have to consider what's going to happen if you continue to stay with someone that's abusive, because the consequences are going to be far more worse than if you was to leave the relationship. You stand a better chance of leaving the relationship than you do in staying, because that relationship is obviously not going to go anywhere.
That's right. That's so true. That's so true. Is there anything that you have that you want to share or leave with our audience today?
Yes, yes. Just work on your self-worth. I always go right back to that. Work on finding your self-worth again, because anytime that you're in any type of toxic relationship, your self-worth is the thing that you really have to focus on, because that's the very thing that gets attacked the most. You're giving up your identity, you're giving up your happiness to please somebody else. And at the same time, if this person was abusive, then they tear down your self-esteem. So work on your self-esteem and make sure that you act, because you can't, I mean, you can know your worth and even see value in who you are, but it's not gonna do anything unless you act. So focus on doing things that makes you happy, and you will find happiness.
That's good. So this is my last question, Kevin. How do you define confidence, and what does confidence mean to you?
Confidence to me is nothing more than a strong belief that you can do something. And not only that, but also the confidence is just I'm gonna say something that pushes confidence is ambition. Ambition to me pushes confidence. So you have a belief that you can do something, a strong belief that you can do something, but then your ambition pushes you to actually do it. So if you have a strong desire to want to do something and you want to do it, then that works well with confidence. So confidence is just believing in yourself and believing that if I do it, then I mean I'm gonna eventually get what I want. And if I fail, I can learn and try again and still succeed. So it's having a strong belief that you can accomplish something.
I like that. The part of that that sits most with me is, if I fail, knowing that a fail is not a failure, but it's a lesson to be learned and then to continue going. So if you're in an abusive relationship and you're trying to get out, and you get out and you don't, like, things aren't going, it ain't gonna be easy. Because you got to rebuild your entire life in a lot of situations. But just know that that is the first step to success. That is the first step to your peace, the first step to your happiness, the first step to your joy, the first step to loving yourself and finally choosing you over anybody else in their foolishness. But know that just because you step out and you don't have all of the support from your family and friends that you thought you would have, or you're not able to get a job as quick as you would like or want to, the struggles are going to be out there, but it doesn't mean that it was a bad choice. You just have to have the grace and the patience enough for yourself to understand, I'm starting over at this age with nothing or with very little. And that's a good first step. And just having the grace and the patience to allow yourself to love yourself back to valuable, to love yourself back to confidence, to love yourself enough to spark that ambition and drive inside of you to go from what you settled for to what you deserve.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's what I got. Kevin, Coach Kevin. Okay, before we leave, I want you to drop your social medias, your website, whatever it is, however anyone can reach you. Please let us know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you can find me on social media on Facebook. You just look up my name and you'll see me on there. I'm posting content on a regular basis, and I don't know if I mean, yeah, if you just look at my name, my first and last name, you'll see me on there. Even though there's always more than one Kevin Shields, but you'll see under personal coach for women survivors of toxic and narcissistic relationships, and that's me. So you'll find me on Facebook, on my Facebook page. You'll see me up there posting all kinds of content, videos, and written content that I write, from my own thoughts, and that's where you'll find me, right there on Facebook.
Okay. Okay. Well, Kevin, I just want to say thank you. It's been such a privilege and an honor to have this conversation with you. All of the information, the validation, the approval, the acceptance, the support that you are providing for all of these women who have been in situations, are in situations, getting out of situations. We just want to say thank you for taking your time to be on this show with us today, to share your knowledge, to help us understand how we can continue to grow and improve and get better. We appreciate your whole life, sir. We appreciate
All
your
right.
whole life. And y'all know what it is. Y'all go ahead, rise above these insecurities, release the burdens and shame and guilt, revive your God given power, purpose, and passion with confidence. Keep shining your light, keep showing up, keep sharing your love. And as always, we gon' pew, 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 pew.